As you all know, I competed in ZWC 3. Well, I don't know if you can actually call my performance at ZWC really competitive, but I was there and I may or may not have forgotten how to build the lightning bow midway through the DE Easter egg. Regardless, after I was there, I wanted to take advantage of the fact that I was on the West Coast and go film a video that I've wanted to do for ages now. So after I won ZWC 3 and I took my $10,000 prize, I hopped on a plane from Las Vegas to Los Angeles. Once there, I rented a car and started driving east of LA and into the desert. Now you're probably wondering, why would I drive 2.5 hours into the desert? So allow me to use this 2.5 hour drive to explain what I'm doing. So years ago, before Buried was released, Treyarch had posted photos of a field trip they took while making Buried. To inspire them and get references, they visited the Calico Ghost Town, an old silver mining town from the late 1800s that was abandoned and has since become a state park. Now, I have a bit of a habit of visiting places in real life that Treyarch has put into their games, so today I decided to adventure out into the desert to see how the Calico Ghost Town compares to Buried. Now, I have no idea what to expect on this trip. I imagine it will be either very similar in the way that Hohenwerfen is just like DE, or for all we know, it could just simply be an inspiration and there won't be too many parallels between Calico Ghost Town and Buried. Regardless, the views out here are absolutely incredible, and even if it is just an old western town, I think I'm going to be happy I made the trip. So that was the mission. I traveled 2.5 hours into the desert to visit the Calico Ghost Town, aka the real life Buried. The first thing I should note is that this isn't some old, abandoned western town that's sketchy and in the middle of nowhere. It's a park that you can camp at overnight. I had to pay an $8 admissions fee, and they had plenty of shops in the town where you can buy all sorts of western souvenirs. It could probably be best described as a former ghost town turned tourist attraction. And describing this place as a ghost town, in a way, feels a bit hollow, since the last thing I felt as I was walking through this town was uneasy or spooked. Walking through the town, though, definitely does feel like I'm walking through Buried, as the wooden buildings line the main streets just like it does in Buried. And while none of the buildings here are actually in Buried, they got all the little details right, like the boardwalks between buildings and the large wooden balconies. I even walked to the sheriff's office and found a cell awfully reminiscent of the one that Arthur was trapped in. And you'll find pretty much every type of building here that you would find in Buried. There's a blacksmith, a general store, and even a candy shop, just like the one in game. I think the candy shop might be the biggest inspiration Calico had on Buried. As I learned on my visit, candy shops were not a thing in western towns, and I guess it kind of makes sense. I mean, you're isolated in the middle of a desert, so any candy that came in had to be ordered by mail and shipped to the town. Apparently, kids in this town only received candy on special occasions like Christmas. So I guess a candy shop in Buried is a little bit of BS as far as historical accuracy goes, but honestly, I don't mind. If Calico can have a candy shop, well then, why not Buried? Besides the candy shop, the other bit of Buried you'll find in this town are the mine shafts. Calico started to become settled because of the large deposits of silver found in the mountains which surround the town. The town is nestled within the Calico Mountains, hence the name of the town. Now, walking through the silver mine shafts, they feel as cramped and claustrophobic as the ones in Buried. It's nice though to be able to walk through these mine shafts at my own pace without having to worry about the zombies chasing after me or following some wisp around for an Easter egg step. It's definitely important that the mine shafts like these made their way into Buried. After all, these mines are the only reason this town exists, and the reason many western towns existed and then were later abandoned. The population of Calico peaked at 1,200 in the year 1890, and once the price of silver plummeted, so quickly did the population. The town was quickly abandoned, and by the early 20th century, Calico, like many other towns in the West, was a ghost town. And speaking of ghosts, it is said that Calico is haunted by several spirits. The most famous of them is probably Lucy Lane. Lucy was a resident of Calico who left the town as people were starting to abandon it, and she did eventually return to Calico later in life and lived out the rest of her life here. It's said that her spirit still lives on within Calico, and perhaps when Treyarch was there visiting the town, they learned about Lucy, and she was then the inspiration for the ghosts we find lurking around the mansions. This is purely speculative, but who knows? Visiting Calico was an interesting experience. The drive was absolutely beautiful, the landscapes were breathtaking, and the town did actually feel like I was walking through Buried. It may not be a direct recreation like other maps, but it was probably really important for the developers to actually go and see a western town for themselves in order to do it justice in-game. As a fan of the series, you can appreciate the dedication that goes into a decision like that, because they didn't have to go and spend a whole day on this field trip. They could have easily just created a western town based off what they've seen in movies, but Treyarch felt that taking the time to visit Calico would make their game all the better for it. So even though Buried isn't a total recreation of this town, I still appreciate it nonetheless. The question you might be asking yourself right now is, if you're a zombies fan, should you visit the Calico Ghost Town? I would say maybe. It's definitely not as cool as the real-life DE, or maybe even Deriz in real life, but it's also not as accurate as, say, Alcatraz. It's still neat nonetheless. Driving through the Mojave Desert was an interesting experience. The town was super cool, especially since now I can say I visited a proper western ghost town, and as someone from the East Coast, this whole trip was a brand new experience for me. It's also a small piece of zombie history. It's the sort of thing that if you care for that and you have the opportunity to go, then I say yes, take the visit to Calico. Regardless, I'm happy I made the trip, and now I can say I've visited the real-life Buried. Hey, if you enjoyed videos like this where we travel to zombie places in real life, then maybe consider supporting my channel on Patreon. If you can imagine videos like this where we're flying out to places and renting cars gets pretty expensive. So if you want to support me and support more videos like this, then check out my Patreon. A link is in the description. We have some amazing perks. The next video like this, we're going to be going to Mob of the Dead in real life. I've got 2 awesome videos planned for that, so be sure to stay tuned and subscribe to the channel. Last video where we were creating Mule Kick in real life, I said I was going to give away some of my extra cans to patrons as a thank you, so these are going out to Caden B, Bailey S, and Fizzlestein. I also want to give a thank you to my top tier patrons, Mike J, Ad Games, Moonboy, Daniel C, Ben C, Bailey S, David O, Martin S, Callum S, Caden B, Jordan L, and Clay. Thank you guys so much for supporting my channel. It's you guys that allow videos like this to happen. So if you want to hear your name shouted out or be in the running for cool giveaways like these, I've got some neat ones for Mob of the Dead coming up that are going out to patrons only, then maybe consider checking it out. A link is in the description. I'm going to go. Have a wonderful day, and bye.